In the last video, we had moved to the point of the War of 1812, which lasted 2 years. But we're going to just quick review. Remember, Madison became president. He was a very short man, extremely intelligent, considered the father of our Constitution. He became president after Jefferson, and a very close relationship with his wife. And he had some really difficulties during his presidency, and he trying to remedy, after the Jefferson's embargo and the economy falls, and so let's end that, and let's try to get the economy building. And yet he was still having some real difficulties with foreign entities. And one of the things was, as we did reverse the Embargo Act, and British began to steal our ships again and press our soldiers. He really was trying to, with the Embargo Act ended, to really secure some good trading agreements and establish to the world we have great resources and great things to trade. To really establish a foreign market for what we produce here and establish a credibility for that. He had a real problem with, as settlers, and we'll look at a map in a second, began to move into these new territories, that the Native Americans would attack them, and so Native Americans wanted to stop losing their land, understandable, and they pursued the British to help, to kind of undermine the American and the settlers there. And so these were some real difficulties that Madison had to deal with, that he was struggling with. And after years of this going on and him trying to work with it, he became president in 1807. By about 1810 and 1811, there was a growing war fever, a growing anger, a growing sentiment of, we're done with this. We are done with what Great Britain has done. We have fought our independence. We are our own nation, and they just keep, financing the Native Americans and impressing our citizens into slavery. So there were two gentlemen in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House, and Calhoun, he was a leading Republican, who really publicly pushed and campaigned, let's declare war. We've had enough, let's declare war. And they were called the War Hawks. So the United States decides, Madison finally says, okay, we're done. We have to show them, there's no more trying to work with them. We have to show them we will not take this anymore. So James Madison was the first president to ask Congress to approve a declaration of war. And here is his declaration of war against the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and the dependencies thereof. And so war is now declared. What had happened was, there was a lot of British support helping the Native Americans attack and kill U.S. settlers who were trying to come in there. And after the Native Americans lost a major battle of Tippecanoe, they really asked the British for help. Here's Spanish Florida. Spain is now an ally of Great Britain. We are very comfortable with having Great Britain an ally of Spain, having contact with us in this hemisphere, with our continent. So the war was fought in many different places. It was fought here. There were places up here along our border with British Canada. It was fought at sea. The British had a naval blockade around us that prevented us from trading and making money and getting necessary supplies in. So the war was fought in many different places. The war lasted about 2 years, but one of the most significant events in the war was towards the end of it, when the British, here is Washington, D.C., and when the British marched on Washington, D.C. and burned most of the Capital. Dolly Madison was in the White House residence at the time, and the president was not in the city. And as they could see the British troops advancing, they knew they were advancing by the smoke and the fires as they were beginning to burn buildings. And so this was just unheard of. Now you've attacked our capital. The next, also another significant event in the War of 1812 is in Maryland here, in this bay, along here, there was a fort on an island, Fort McHenry. And we'll talk about Francis Scott Key and what he saw during that battle, because that was a key fort to keep to help prevent the British from coming around to Washington, D.C. also. So the British made it to Washington, D.C., and they came up south of Washington, D.C., and they got it. The city surrenders nearly all the government buildings. Dolly Madison is grabbing all the significant historical things from the White House to drag them out of the city, paintings and papers and things we have today, because she was so thoughtful under duress. And when the British invade Washington, D.C., it really rallies the Americans. They were like, okay, you've crossed the line. You have attacked our capital. You have burned our capital. No mas, no more. It is now. And the war lasted a couple years, but this was the impetus to really motivate the Americans to say, okay, we're pulling out the stops and we will defeat you. As I was saying, Francis Scott Key was a prisoner. He was fighting the war and he was a prisoner. And what the British would do is they would keep the prisoners. There was no jails or anything. I mean, there were some jails, but they weren't really accessible. So they would take the prisoners and they would put them in the holes of ship, in the bottom of the ship, and keep them there, and they would be off the coast. And so Francis was watching the British from his ship use their guns on the ship to bombard this fort. Because if they could get Fort McHenry, then here's D.C., here's Baltimore, and here's the fort. If they could capture the fort, take Baltimore, and come around this way to get to Washington, D.C., then the capital would be confronted on both sides, and essentially America would not only lose the war, but then maybe Britain could grab back all those territories and those colonies. So this was very significant. So he is watching the fort get bombarded. Sun goes down. They are fighting for 12 hours. He hears it. And he's very anxious throughout the night. He's wondering, did the British actually gain access to the fort? Did they conquer it? And in the morning he observes that the American flag still flew over the fort. The British had not taken it. And he's so overwhelmed and so thankful, he writes his poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry. Eventually, this poem becomes our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, which you all know. What was some of the impact of this short but significant war? Well, it really gave the Americas a sense, the citizens, a sense of national pride. Yeah, 30 years earlier, 25 years earlier, they established their own country, 35. They established their own country, but it was like, well, am I a Carolinian, an American? It took a while to understand their identity. Once they really pushed the British back again in this war, and especially after they burned the United States Capitol, there was a sense of, we are a game player in the world stage. We can push back a major empire. We are something, and we are here, and we're here to stay. It also pushed the Americas to really begin to build up their foreign trade, really begin to establish trading partners and becoming, we are here, and we also now can become financially significant. The other thing it did, in order to move all the resources in the Americas to be shipped out, to be traded, the United States really began to look at transportation. How do we move all our goods and resources to sell them, to trade with them, and establish a great economy? And the third thing is that the Native Americans in the Ohio River Valley, in modern day Illinois and Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, they really understood now that they had no more British backing, they were done. There was no way to stop the settlers moving in. There was no way they could win against the large numbers of the army and the settlers. And so it really permanently opened up those territories for people to move west. And the Native Americans just got to the point where they had to understand this is their new reality. Not that it was right, but that's their new reality. Another impact that Monroe did, he sent out a doctrine or a proclamation, and to let the world know, the European countries know, that we are now a country to be reckoned with. We are here in this new hemisphere, and we are it. And there are 3 points to his doctrine. He really wanted the European nations to know this isn't just open seas and you could come and colonize and try to take land here anymore. This is our country. We are a country. You are not welcome to colonize. This is our land. You cannot take it. And they said, we are the ones in control of this Western Hemisphere, North and South America. You are not. So, do not think you can come and colonize and try to take our land. Any attempt to colonize would be perceived by the United States of America as a threat. Not something we're going to compromise with, not something we're going to tolerate. You don't tolerate a threat, this nation will not tolerate a threat. And he was making it very clear. He was letting them know what would happen if they tried to do anything. And then they said, conversely, we are staying out of your business in Europe, especially in Europe. This was mainly to the powers of Europe. We are staying out of your business. You people over in that continent, you want to fight each other, you want to do this, you want to do that, you go, have at it. We will not interfere. We don't have a grave interest in what you guys do apart from an economic interest. So we're letting you know this is the new standard now that we won this war. And we will not compromise on this. Now, in the next video, we're going to look at one last thing in this period from 1776 to 1820 that really is going to lead us in about 30 years to some very significant events for our country. And we will cover that in the next video.